Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Wag and Purr and creator of Companion Animal Psychology blog. My co-host Kristi Benson is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works for the Academy for Dog Trainers. We don't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your veterinarian, dog trainer or cat behaviourist as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. Hi everyone, welcome to the Positive Post in Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd. I'm the creator of Companion Animal Psychology blog, the Positive Post, and the author of Wag, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, and the upcoming Purr, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy. And as always, I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Kristi Benson, who is special correspondent to Companion Animal Psychology and the Positive Post, who has a wonderful blog of her own, who is a staff member at the Academy for Dog Trainers and is an all-round wonderful person and dog trainer too. So, hi Kristi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I thought we could start today by talking about truth sandwiches, because I wrote a post recently for Psychology Today about what a truth sandwich is and how we can use it to counteract misinformation, because there is so much misinformation in dog training, isn't there?
There absolutely is. Yeah, for sure. There is.
Yeah. So the idea of a truth sandwich comes from George Lakoff, who is a cognitive linguist. He's an emeritus professor now. But he's actually one of the people who's done a huge amount of research on metaphor. So I'm not going to go too far down memory lane, but metaphor is what I did my PhD on. And I actually once organised a conference near Maastricht in the Netherlands, at which George Lakoff was an invited speaker. So he's a brilliant mind. Anyway, he has this idea of the truth sandwich. So we know that when you're talking about misinformation and trying to counteract it, it's really important to put most of the effort into talking about the truth and what you want people to know instead of about the myth, because it's all too easy to accidentally spread the myth, spread it further. There's a whole host of reasons why you don't want to do that. So this idea of a truth sandwich is that you sandwich the fake information, that the false information that you want to correct, in between two bits of truth. And I know it kind of, when we talk about sandwiches, often we're actually quite interested in the filling. But in this case, we have to think of it as squashing the false information in between the two bits of the truth. So it's quite a nice idea. And the post has got some quite nice responses. So I thought it would be fun to talk about how we can use the truth sandwich to counteract different myths about dogs. So I'm going to ask you in a moment, I'm going to ask you for some of your myths that you really, really hate about dogs. But I'm going to ask you to do something which is actually, I find quite hard, but from a psychon perspective, it really helps if you're going to say something that's false, if you say something about how it's false before you say it. So instead of just saying the myth, say, I really hate this myth because it's so wrong or whatever, and then say what the myth is, if that's possible.
I will do my best.
It's hard to do. Yeah.
Oh, yes. You're putting me on the spot.
I am putting you on the spot. So sorry about that.
That's okay. I put you on the spot all the time.
You can come up with some evil questions for me later on.
You know it. Okay.
I will be paying for it.
On the myths?
Yeah, I will pay for it later, I know. So, okay, so is there a myth about dogs that you really hate?
Okay, there is certainly, I think, one of the myths that's iniquitous and that harms dogs and harms people's relationship with dogs is the myth that dogs are sort of primarily motivated by this desire to gain status.
And by the way, that was perfect. I love the way you introduced it. So before we hear it, we know already that it harms dogs. And I think, personally, I find it quite hard to train yourself to do things like that, but it does help because, you don't get the myth first. So yeah, dogs trying to get status. And this is about the idea of dominance that used to be popular. Fortunately, is not as popular as it used to be.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think especially among dog pros, I think we're really getting that message out to dog pros. But I know often when I work with dog guardians, there can be this, there's this like sort of default that, people are like, oh, well, can you help me de-status my dog, essentially, because they're like, he's jumping on me or whatnot, dog is doing X, Y, Z. Can you reduce the dog status so that he'll stop doing that? Rather than, as a dog pro, we always just go right to, well, we're going to train your dog so your dog doesn't do X, Y, Z anymore, or give your dog something else to do, or, we get right into the nuts and bolts of training, I think, in our minds. But people, honestly, in many cases, in enough cases that it's worrisome, come at it as this, we need to reduce this relationship between me and my dog, the status differential.
Yeah, I think people feel that. And also people feel bad sometimes if their dog has a behavior problem or a behavior issue of some sort, because they think, well, it must be my fault for letting them sleep on the bed, or my fault because I let them on the settee with me, because they have these erroneous ideas in their head that they've heard from other places. You can't blame them for having these ideas, but they've heard that you shouldn't do those things. And it's not true at all, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. In fact, please let your dog sleep on the bed.
Yeah, and cuddle on the settee with you.
Yeah.
And so
like I live in a really safe area, so I actually open the door and like, get out of the way. Please get out of the door before me, dogs. I know that doesn't mean anything. It's not a slippery slope to bad behavior in the future.
Yeah, and then like for people walking their dog on leash, and it just surprises me when people think the dog is meant to be next to you or behind you and they're not allowed to be in front, because who is the walk for anyway? It should be for the dog or for both of you together. It's not for you showing off that you've got status over a dog or something like that.
Oh, I know. And I think there's like a lot of, as dog pros, there's a lot of relief we can give people to just, because people let their dogs walk in front and go through the door first and sleep on the bed anyway. And then I think they feel kind of bad about it and then say, oh, I'm allowing that to happen because I secretly kind of like it when my dog does that. But now look, I'm suffering because my dog jumped up on grandma or something, right? Mm. Or growled at me over the food dish or whatever. So I think we can really provide this huge amount of relief to people by just saying, actually, that's totally fine. It's actually beneficial for your dog to have, their own sort of head when you're walking dogs, to give your dog the freedom to do what they want and go fast if they want, go slow if they want, and make choices. Like, that's actually a benefit. So it's nice to give people that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really nice. And it is such a relief for people when they hear it. As you say, they're doing it anyway. Yeah. But I mean, it's quite an old idea. And there was some research a long time ago that actually looked at whether playing tug with your dog and letting the dog win would lead to any kind of behavior issues, because that's one of the other things that people used to say. You shouldn't, erroneously, they would say you shouldn't let your dog win at tug. But like, what's the point in playing tug with your dog if you're not going to let them win? I mean, that's the fun of it from their point of view. And so I think it must have been a really fun piece of research to do, to test the dog's obedience on different commands and things like that, and play tug with them and see what happens according to whether they won or lost. And the dogs were more engaged in the game when they were allowed to win, so that's good. It had no effect whatsoever on their obedience. Of course, it did not cause them to suddenly be disobedient just because they were able to win the game of tug. So, right. Yeah, for sure, these are good things. Yeah.
So what would be your truth sandwich for this?
I'm just thinking, how shall we truth sandwich it? So, I mean, there's different ways of looking at it, because one thing is simply to say that dogs aren't trying to gain status all the time. Other ways of doing it might be to talk about how we actually do dog training. So to talk about using positive reinforcement or something like that instead. I quite like to go with that way, because you're giving someone something positive that they can do. Right. So you can say that it's really effective to train your dog with positive reinforcement, and it's fun for you and your dog. And it's not true that you have to dominate your dog to make them do whatever it is that you want them to do. That's completely outdated now. We know it's outdated advice. So really, you might as well use food as positive reinforcement, or other things they like, such as games and petting if they like it. And then you'll have a better relationship with your dog. I don't know.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. I also like it with the first part, like if the first of the delicious crusty sourdough loaf is something that sort of allows you to ally yourself with your client a little bit, if you're talking to a client in particular, because they're paying you, right? And they're always feeling a little bit ready to be judged, So to be like, oh, I used to think that too, or that used to be like a really popular theory or something, so to let them know that it's not actually their fault that they are thinking that. This is something that people did used to think, or, even like if you can make it really short. I don't think it's worthwhile to go like 40 minutes into David Meach and the wolf studies. You know what I'm saying? But to be like, oh, we used to really think that about wolves, blah, blah. So carry on.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of doing it, because then they don't have to feel that they did something wrong. And let's face it, they haven't, because there are all these ideas still out there, and people that I think are trying to do the best by their dog anyway. So we don't want to make them feel like idiots. They're not being idiots. They care about their dog and they're doing the best they can, especially if they've had you to work with them. So yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. Okay, are we ready for another myth?
Okay. Yeah.
So do you have another myth that you hate about dogs?
I think another myth that is commonly sort of put out there, especially by trainers who continue to use aversive tools, but that simply isn't true. And I know this because it's how I live with my dogs, and my dogs are perfectly fine, is the myth that dogs need to learn via punishment so that they know what's wrong. So this myth that I guess it's like the balance myth. You can't just teach dogs what to do. You have to teach them what not to do by punishing them with corrections. So there's always like that sort of the sort of underpinning of there needs to be an aversive consequence for dogs who are doing something wrong.
Yeah, I think those two myths kind of go together, because I feel like the first one about dominance and leadership, it kind of brings out the worst in people when they come to think about how they should interact with their dog, and sometimes it kind of makes them feel like they should behave like some kind of 80s TV film army person, bossing people about, yelling at them and telling them what to do, and being very punishing, that kind of thing, rather than treating their dog as a family member who needs to be taught how to live in a human world and that kind of thing. And this is a really important topic, because we know that most people do use positive reinforcement to train their dog, but a very large number of people at the moment, unfortunately, do also use punishment as well. So most people do use a mix of methods. And I think it can be tricky sometimes for people to understand that positive reinforcement is what they need. They don't have to be telling their dog off for doing things. And the other thing is that in that moment, when they see the dog doing something wrong, that's when they think of training the dog, and they're not necessarily thinking of it at the other times when the dog is doing things perfectly that they would really like to see again. And they don't necessarily think, okay, I can give them a treat for this. Like Kathy Sadeo's way of having 50 treats and doling them out, throughout the day, every time you see your dog do something good. Yeah.
Remembering to reinforce the cute behavior that you want to see more of.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is that there's a lot of research about the problems of using punishment to train dogs, aversive methods, and like fear, anxiety, stress, a worse relationship with the owner, pessimism even, and so on. So there are actually a lot of things that are bad for your dog that are connected with the use of aversive methods. So again, this is a really important one to get across, isn't it?
And it is. It's so hard, because I think it feels really true to us humans. It feels really true that my dog is going to bite someone, or harm himself or me if I don't shut down XYZ. It doesn't feel true. It doesn't feel right that actually, no, you are increasing the likelihood of your dog behaving aggressively if you use aversive methods. So that doesn't feel true. It doesn't feel like it follows. And the fact that we can spout research and say, actually, using a shock collar on your dog will increase the likelihood, statistically, that there'll be these poor outcomes. That just doesn't feel true. No, my God, I got to shut this down. This is dangerous. This is worrisome, So this is a hard one to fight back against, I think, just because there is that sense of it doesn't actually follow, it doesn't feel true when we hear it.
Yeah, I think so. And also the other thing is people would really like an instant response, and they kind of feel like if they punish the dog in that moment, that's an instant thing. Whereas training the dog to do the things that you want them to do, I mean, sometimes it's very quick. If you're teaching a sit stay and you're efficient, it can be really quick to do. But in normal life, for an ordinary person, actually, it can take quite a while sometimes to train all of the behaviors that you want. So it can feel that it's slower, even though it's much better for your dog. And I think it's and even though actually people think that punishment works, even if they end up yelling at the dog lots of times, they might yell at the dog every time they do it, and somehow they don't realize that the dog is still doing it and they're still yelling at the dog. And if they've been spending that time training, then actually they might have got the results quicker. But that's not the way that people perceive it.
No. And I think we can't forget, I think it's important that we're honest to ourselves about ourselves, and do a little self-anthropology. And punishing people who have stepped across a line feels good for us humans. It's something that humans have evolved to find it reinforcing, which is kind of a crappy thing about us, right? But I think if we recognize it and go, oh yeah, that's a true thing about myself, then, hopefully we can step a little bit beyond it and go, okay, just because it feels good to me to yell at my dog when they have made a house training mistake, it doesn't mean it's helping my dog. It's probably not, it's probably making my dog run into the basement, and then I'll find a bunch of it, like it's not going to be helpful for my dog. It's harming the relationship I have with my dog. It's setting me back training wise, but I can recognize it feels good, but that doesn't mean that it's helping.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the other time it can happen is when people feel that they have to do something. Like if the dog is misbehaving in public, especially with a reactive dog, and people feel embarrassed because the dog is, lunging and barking on leash, and it does feel embarrassing. I understand that. And they think people are staring at them or whatever. And sometimes other people actually are quite unpleasant in those moments too. And so they feel that they have to do something, and they don't feel right giving treats because they should be doing counter conditioning instead. So it can actually feel harder to do the right thing sometimes, really, than to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So how should we truth sandwich this one?
I think I would naturally fall into something either that it feels good to punish because we're human and this is what humans do, depending on my client, right? Depending on the relationship I had already sort of built with my client, or go with the, I used to think that too, or start off with the whole, this used to be the way that we treated dogs and children, and if you go back far enough, wives and other people, I think that's how I would probably start. But then I would go into, I think that the other end of the loaf would be, but actually it's better for our dog. It's better for our relationship. It's easier. It's safer for your children. I think that's a good one. It's actually, we're going to keep your kids safer, just sometimes where this comes from, right? A worry and fear about their children. If we train the dog to do something else instead, or if we attend to the dog's emotional state rather than their behavior, that's where I would go probably.
Awesome. I think that's great. That's a wonderful baguette right there. Yes.
The pizza sub.
Yes, that's brilliant. Yeah, so I mean it's similar to the first one because we want to make the truth being the bit about positive reinforcement. It's effective, it's fun, it works for your dog, and then squash in the middle the bit about, okay, people used to use punishment, but actually already you can start to move on to, but actually that's not what we need to do. We can change the dog's behavior without doing that. Yeah. Good.
And I think you can also get a lot of sort of buy-in if you start talking about relationships between people that aren't parent to child. So it's like, imagine if your boss wanted you to do something different at work and they, shocked you or slapped you or something, or, used some kind of an aversive consequence, and people would be like, oh, that wouldn't function for me. That's illegal. That's actually illegal for that to happen. Right. So I think you can sometimes get by saying, a dog is an adult organism that we're living with. It's not some kind of an offspring that we have this need to sort of morally shape, right? I think you can get some buy-in sometimes using that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that reminds me of something else actually, which is that when we look at how things have changed for children and how people do parent children, teach them things using kind of corporal punishment or whatever, in the countries that banned it, the ones that banned it and did best are the ones that also had some kind of education campaign for people that explained to them why, as opposed to just actually banning the methods. And I think that emphasizes how important it is to keep talking about the right kind of approach to take and why it works, basically. Yeah. Okay. Let's do another dog myth and then we'll do something about cats. So What's another myth about dogs that you really hate?
I think something that I find is a myth that's frustrating to me, and also on a personal level, it's something that I don't live my life this way. So, and I think it's one of those things where we're talking about judgment, where people judge you if you don't buy into this myth, and I don't. And so my dogs live in a particular way, and then people come over and they're like, "You're a dog trainer, and your dogs are like this." But the myth is that that dogs should fit themselves into our lives. So dogs should become more human or more quiet or more they don't impact us, that we can get a dog and keep living the way that we live, but the dogs will fit into the little holes in our lives. And I think it's pernicious, and it's also wrong, and it's sort of unpleasant for dogs, and it really detracts from their character. Like when we bring a dog into our lives, they're themselves, and they're going to be doggish because they're dogs. And the cool part of it is being able to live with a creature who's a totally different species with different motivations and who likes different things. And that's part of the coolness. And also I feel like dog guardians need to mold their lives a little bit more to their dogs. Not all. There's tons of dog guardians who are just doing backflips for the dogs, which is awesome and hilarious. But there's a lot who aren't too, who are like, well, why do I need to walk something like half people don't even walk their dogs every day. So, and I'm just like, wow, the dogs don't need to become this like square peg for the round holes in our lives.
Yeah. So we have to do things to help our dogs fit into our homes. It's not just about them adjusting to us. We all have to fit in, and it's important to let dogs be dogs and do the things that dogs need to do, or cats be cats and do the things that cats need to do as well. Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to provide them the environment where they can express normal behaviors and be comfortable and joyful. Like we need to give them, I know I've sent you enough pictures, but we probably have like 30 beds in our house for our dogs. We set things up, like we put a nice bed in front of a low window that we have so the dogs can look out. We try and set up our environment and our dog's environment so that they can express these behaviors and like find joy.
Yeah. And like for my cats, I have cat trees by the windows. Pepper doesn't look out of the window so much. He just wants to be in the same room as us. Unlike Bodger used to be by the window watching all the time, but Pepper just prefers to be with us wherever we are. But the cats have their cat trees by the window so they can see out, and especially because they're indoors only cats, I think it's important that they can see out of the window. But yeah, there are some people, as you say, who basically are doing backflips for their dog and, do everything they can. And they have lots of enrichment and do lots of training, and they keep their dog feeling safe and so on. And then there are some people who don't realize, I think sometimes they don't even realize that there are things they can do. So they don't understand that you can not just take your dog for a walk, give them lots of chances to sniff, have lots of food puzzle toys for them and things like that. But I feel like when you know about those things, it makes you happier too, because you have a lovely dog who has what they need, and it's nice to see them doing these things. For me, one of the joys of having a dog or a cat is seeing them doing dog and cat things, and Apricot has come to agree.
The most Apricot thing ever is sitting on someone's lap.
Yeah, very sweet. Yeah. So okay, so how do we truth sandwich this one? You could start just by saying that we're responsible for everything in dogs' lives, so it's up to us to provide what dogs need and give them the chance to do doggy things. Some people think, unfortunately, that the dog should just fit into our lives, but because they're living creatures, that's not the case. And if we provide what the dog needs and give them exercise, enrichment, training, and so on, they'll be happier, and that's good for us too, because we like seeing a happy dog. That's one way.
Yeah, I like it.
Good. I think
sometimes and I think this is just a sort of a running theme, but I like getting people on board with the idea that dogs, that it's a useful way to view dogs is like this really cool roommate that we love a lot, rather than a dependent. So it's like they do depend on us, but they're adult organisms with their own desires and interests. And if we can help them, sort of meet their own needs in that department, then that's sort of preferable than boxing dogs up or putting them in a crate all the time, or, I'm going to chew the toys, I'm going to lift all the toys, that kind of thing. No, we need to give them more toys.
Yes, and toys that can stand up to all the chewing, and yes, lots of things to do, especially for dogs that are getting frustrated. They can need quite a lot sometimes, a lot more enrichment and so on. Yeah, definitely. Sure. I agree. And thinking of them as living creatures, living, breathing creatures with their own wants and needs, and we have to kind of try and let them be themselves.
Yeah.
Yes, I like that.
I think admitting that dogs can be frustrating for us as people is also can be a nice slice of bread. I think, people are, especially in a client situation, because a client might be feeling like, I'm doing it wrong. I'm getting frustrated. I bet you never get frustrated at your dogs. I bet your dogs are perfect. They have that kind of soup of shame, and you can be like, no, it's actually, that's false. I get frustrated at my dog. Dogs can be frustrating, and the way we reduce that frustration is by, 1, 2, 3. Here's the different things that we can do.
Yeah. And also, I mean, no one's perfect anyway, but I think people have this ideal that your relationship with the dog should be perfect, and it's just not. There always will be things, and there always will be things that change. Even if you have a dog who is pretty perfect as a puppy, things might change throughout their lives. Everyone has different things to deal with. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Good. Okay, yeah. So we should talk about one to do with cats as well.
Okay.
And
You're up.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to describe the myth, but there are a lot of people who think that their cats just hate their furniture and just want to wreck the furniture, unfortunately. And we know that scratching is a natural behavior for cats. So we have to provide cats with the right surfaces to scratch. And I didn't do a very good job of introducing that myth at all, apart from saying that it was a myth. So I didn't do that very well. I should have said more to begin with anyway. But anyway, scratching is a natural behavior for cats. They have to do it to keep their claws in good condition. When they scratch, they're depositing pheromones as well. And if we give them good scratching posts, they will actually use them. Unfortunately, some people erroneously think they won't. And some people, it's completely understandable that you will get frustrated with your cat if you have this lovely sofa and your cat is putting holes in it or pulling threads or whatever. And we also know that many people don't provide the kind of scratching posts that that cats like, because they have to be tall. The cat has to really be able to stretch out.
Yeah.
And then every cat is an individual, and some of them prefer a horizontal surface. Like Melina actually quite likes a horizontal surface to scratch on. I bought her a special mat to scratch. And different fabrics like sisal or carpet or rope, cardboard, wood. I've got a wooden one. Harley won't touch it at all, but Melina quite likes that one. Melina actually will scratch any kind of surface, I think. She's quite open-minded in the kinds of surfaces she likes, but she does like a horizontal thing. And so people need to know what to provide for their cat. And the other thing, and this relates to what we were saying about dogs as well, is that positive reinforcement works. So if you give your cat a treat just after they've used a scratching post, it can help to keep them using the post instead of moving to the furniture. So, I mean, I bet you have lots of scratching posts or surfaces that your cat can scratch too.
Apricot's pretty easy. He does have a scratching post, like a cat tree with a scratching post on it. We've tried other things and he hasn't really shown a lot of interest, but he does like that. And so we've refreshed it as needed. It's got rope wound around it. So he's pretty easy in that regard. He's never, knock on wood, even tried any of our furniture.
Yeah, well, Harley is kind of like that. I think
it's interesting that it's the myth is that people are sort of ascribing cats motivation, where it does. So it's hard to get at that. People have this strongly held belief that cats are doing it to wreck the furniture. They might. You hear things like this from dog clients too, like, my dog hates my couch. I'm like, if the dog chewed the couch or something, it could even be a separation anxiety dog. The dog doesn't like X, Y, Z, and you're like, well, that's probably not the case. It could certainly be the case. It's probably not the case. There's probably another need that's not being met or something.
Yeah, and I think people will say the same about cats. They'll say, oh, my cat hates the sofa, or even my cat hates me. They scratch the sofa to spite me, that kind of thing. I think we often ascribe these internal states to our pets, and without really understanding what it's like from the dog or the cat's point of view. Yeah. So we need a big, fat, chunky piece of bread talking about why cats need to scratch. Scratching is and again, that scratching is a natural behavior, so we can't expect them not to scratch. And if they scratch somewhere we don't like to do it, it's actually not the cat being a problem, it's the fact that we haven't provided what they need. So your cat is not scratching the furniture to spite you or because they hate your sofa, but they haven't got the right kind of scratching post, or it's not in the right place or something like that. So you have to get a nice, big, tall, sturdy scratching post And actually, I think sometimes you can position them strategically next to wherever the cat happens to be scratching anyway, and then hopefully they'll move over. But then also when they do scratch with the post, you can give them a treat and reward them. Right. And that will help. Good.
And I think if there's, this maybe comes up with cats as well. I don't take cat clients, but if there's like the whole, my last dog never did XYZ. I think it's a useful chunk of bread is, oh, my first cat never did that thing. But my next cat did. So, it's, sort of saying, I get it that this is a weird thing that came up, but maybe it's not about your cat. Maybe it's just about cat's personal preference. Like cats have personal preferences. And who would have thought this was news to me too,
Yeah. And I think it helps people to know that their pet is an individual. So every cat is an individual. Every dog is an individual too. So they're all different, and you have to learn what your cat likes or what your dog likes. Yeah, absolutely. And it may be different.
Pheromone stuff is so interesting. And it's something that, I never even heard about before maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I didn't even know that it was a thing. Right. And so I think bringing something like that up, did you know that this is actually kind of the way that your cat sort of gets themselves comfortable in their own environment? They're doing this thing. It exists. It's neat. They do it with their little feet, and you can kind of head people off at the pass by giving them something new and fun and shiny. They think, I didn't know that cats leave this sort of scent that they can access.
Yeah, I think it's really cool information to share with people. And the nice thing about the best dog and cat owners is that they just want to learn more about their pet. And I think there are a lot of people who really absolutely adore their cats, and they really do want to learn everything they can about cats. So yeah, that's nice. I think people are quite receptive to that kind of information, and it's fun to share with them.
Yeah.
Good. So we've done 4 truth sandwiches. I think that's enough.
We're all full of.
Yeah, big enough lunch for today. But one of the things that people sometimes do to deal with behavior issues is talk about management. And I happen to know you got something very cool coming up about management. Would you like to tell us about it?
Yes. Okay. So this is really fun. The Academy, I was actually spurred on to this because I read a really interesting blog that I think you shared by Jessica Ring, who is an Academy graduate who has a training company called My Fantastic Friend. And she wrote a blog that talked about management. And it just got me thinking, management is so important. So for members of our audience that don't know what management is, it just means preventing your dog essentially from doing the thing that you don't want them to do by changing up their environment. So if they're doing something you don't want them, this is my thing. You don't want your dog to do XYZ in the basement. You can just put a gate up that keeps your dog out of the basement, rather than training your dog to do another behavior, which can be labor intensive, especially if you're not around all the time, or, if your dog pulls on leash, you can put a new harness on your dog that clips in the front, so it's preventing the thing that you don't want your dog to do by changing up their environment. And it's something that dog trainers are really good at, like we learn about it in school, we talk about it, we share great ideas with each other. We like crow with delight when our clients come up with their own great management tips and tricks. So I thought this is a topic that I think dog trainers talk about a lot, but it's not something that we talk about a ton with the public. And it's so useful, it can be so easy and helpful for people. It can provide immediate relief, and then it can allow training to take effect without the dog practicing or, gaining continued reinforcement from something where we don't want them to, be doing that. And for dogs who are upset, it can immediately make their lives just so much better. Right. So the Academy decided to do like an entire month that's just celebrating management.
That's awesome.
It's going to be March is Management Month at the Academy for Dog Trainers. So we have a bunch of great blogs. We've got a bunch of people who signed up to publish blogs all throughout March. We're going to do a video series. It's going to be really fun. So yeah, it's all going to be sort of centered on the Academy's Facebook page, and then we'll be sharing the videos too on our Instagram. So I think it should be great. It should be useful. Jane and I are doing a conversation blog too about it. So
awesome. That's fantastic. And I think that's so helpful because, as you say, we dog trainers think of it all the time. It's our bread and butter, but I think for ordinary people, it's not always what they think of first. No. So I think that will be really helpful. And a whole month of it is going to be so much fun and so many cool ideas there. So if people want to know more about that, they can follow the Academy for Dog Trainers on Facebook or Instagram. and I will get all the links there. Perfect. Thank you. And I have an exciting event I want to talk about too, which you will be taking part in as well. But because we're coming up to Companion Animal Psychology's 10th anniversary, which is just amazing. Like, I can hardly believe that it's 10 years since I started writing this blog. So that's happening at the end of March. And as an event to celebrate, I'm going to be having a conversation. Well, it's going to be me and Lili Chin and Sassafras Lowrey in conversation with you as well. And it's a free event that people can come and listen to. And if you want to sign up for that, the details are on companionanimalpsychology.com, and you can register. You have to register for it. And of course, we would love it if you would buy our books as well. So Lili Chin, I think everybody knows who Lili and Sassafras are, but Lili Chin does these amazing, wonderful drawings at doggiedrawings.net, and her book, Doggie Language, which you can see behind me, is what she'll be talking about, and talking about how she wrote it and drew it and illustrated it and so on. It's a best-selling book. I think lots of people love it. So you can come and listen to her. And then you can also come and listen to Sassafras Lowrey, and her book, Chew This Journal, is also up there behind me. And that's a really lovely book full of cool ideas of ways to have fun with your dog, activities to do with your dog, crafts to, celebrate your dog and things like that. So she's going to talk about that as well. And I will be talking about my upcoming book, Purr, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy, which is full of practical tips. So this is an event for both dog and cat people. And we'll be giving away a copy of each of those books. So a copy of Purr, a copy of WAG, a copy of Chew This Journal, and a copy of Doggie Language to people who actually attend live. So if you want to come, you're very welcome. It's on March 28th. And Kristi, you're going to be hosting. So that's really exciting. Thank you very much. But yeah, so that's going to be really exciting as part of the 10th anniversary celebrations. And I don't know, I cannot believe that it has turned into a 10-year blog. When I wrote that first blog, I had no idea if I was going to keep going or anything. So that's very exciting. Yeah.
It's a huge achievement. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I guess it's time now to turn to the books part of this conversation. So I'll go first with the book club book, and then we'll pick your choice and then my choice. So first of all, the book club book at the moment is this one, Aesop's Animals by Jo Wimpenny. And it's actually a really great read. I haven't finished yet. I don't know if you can see, I've been turning lots of the pages down where there are good quotes and things. So Aesop's Animals, The Science Behind the Fables. And each chapter takes one of those fables, and then she writes about what's true about it and what we know about the science. And then she ends each chapter with a section on fact or fiction. Is it true? How can we sum it all up? So it's really fascinating. It's really well written. It covers a range of different animals, which is nice too. For example, there's a chapter on donkeys, and we don't often get to read about donkeys and what we know about donkeys. And there's a really cool chapter near the beginning about birds and ravens and so on. So that's really good. And there's quite a bit about dogs. Obviously, there's quite a lot about dogs in here as well, and foxes. So it's just really interesting. And also the way she writes about it, you can hear kind of like the intellectual history behind some of these ideas. So she talks, for example, writes about Mark Bekoff having been mentored by Michael Fox. And then a bit later, she writes about how Mark Bekoff was a mentor to Alexandra Horowitz and her research. So, and it's similar with like the chapter on birds. She talks about who the people were and who they worked with. So, the whole history of these ideas. And I feel like it really packs a lot of information into this book as well. But it's a really interesting read, really fascinating. So we haven't finished reading it. We're still reading it for the book club at the moment. It's the book for this month, February, and this will be going out. This recording will go out in March. But anyway, I highly recommend it. Definitely a good book.
Cool. I should pick it up.
Cool. So, what are you reading at the moment, or which book are you going to share with us?
Okay. So I read this when I first got it. I think it was a couple of years ago, but I picked it up again recently just as sort of easy on the brain. But it's a book called Soonish. And it's by Kelly and Zach Weinersmith, who and Zach Weinersmith is the cartoonist who's behind SMBC, Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, which is just one of my favorite webcomics, like so clever and hilarious. And I love how he can tie in like something like robotics and then like evolution in just really clever, hilarious ways. And then philosophy, so definitely I knew I had to get this book when I first saw that they had written it, but it's about the 10 emerging technologies that'll improve and or ruin everything. And so he writes about things that could happen in the future. And I think one of them has actually come to pass, which is reusable rockets. I think I saw a story that reusable rockets is an actual thing now. But it's like, how, so the question is, how can we get stuff into space more cheaply? And then they talk about all these random ideas, can we get an elevator that goes up to space? And okay, yes, we could, but the problem is we don't have a material that's strong enough. Would this material be strong enough? And he talks to material scientists and rocket academics and, just like really, really brilliant people, and has these, I just think it would be hilarious, fun conversations with them about the possibilities for the future. And then, like medicine that's sort of based on our own DNA and, all these sort of, is this a possibility? And then what could possibly go wrong with it? Is there like, could there be a terrorist attack? And what happens if there's a terrorist attack on a carbon fiber line that weighs a jillion pounds, and then gravity, sends it down to Earth? Could that? So it's a fun romp through technology and medicine and futurism, and then there's extra cartoons. So if you like his style of cartoons, which I love, then you get these extra cartoons to back up the story. So it's just a super enjoyable. It's lighthearted, but it's also clever and fun. So that's what I picked up.
Sounds very cool. Thank you. I'll have to look into that. And then, so I've got fiction. I've just finished reading this, Hotel Arcadia by Sunny Singh, she lives in Britain, I think. So she's a British writer, but she's lived all around the world. And this book it's about a terrorist attack. So one of the main characters is actually a war photographer called Sam, and she's staying in this really posh, fancy hotel in what she thinks is a safe place. Like she's not there on assignment or anything like that. And then she gets a call from the hotel manager called Abby to tell her that there's a terrorist attack and she has to stay in her room. And gunmen have come into the hotel and they've shot lots of people and they've taken hostages and it's all been broadcast on TV, and she's stuck in her room. But she's a war photographer, so she's not going to stay in her room. She wants to get out there and get some pictures of the action safely. So it's full of tension about what she does. And on when she goes out and she's trying to see what's happened, and she takes pictures of people who've been shot in the hotel rooms, basically. And she finds a kid who's still alive in one of the rooms. So she has to rescue him and take him back to her room. But she's not the maternal type, so she's not used to dealing with the kid. But now the kid has to be quiet, because if he makes a noise, then the gunman might hear and come and shoot them. And all the while, Abby, the hotel manager, he's managed to get into a room where he's safe, and he's got camera access. He's got access to all the CCTV cameras, so he can relay to the police and the army outside what's going on. So it takes place over a few days while this is going on, and it's a really, really interesting read. It's a really good book. It's full of action, but it's also quite thoughtful about like what it means to be a war photographer, for example. And the backstory of Abby, is the manager, is quite interesting as well, because he's from a military family, but he hasn't wanted to go into the military. So anyway, it's a really good book. It's a really good read. So I've enjoyed that. It's the kind of thing that you don't want to put down until you get to the end.
Sounds great.
Good. So I think this is the end of our conversation for today. So we'll just say thank you very much to everyone for listening. I'll put the details of the books in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about us, you can find us at kristibenson.com and companionanimalpsychology.com. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Watch the recording of Reading Cats and Dogs, Lili Chin, Sassafras Lowrey and Zazie Todd in conversation with Kristi Benson on the Companion Animal Psychology YouTube channel. Purr, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy is available from all good bookstores. Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bousse. See you next time!